Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Monday, May 20th, 2024. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. I do want to report that we are taping this actually Sunday night, May 19th. So sometimes when we do this, we get date confusion, but you will be listening to this beginning on the 20th of May. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Media commentary columnist Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
And Washington commentary columnist Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John. And I'd just like to begin the show today by giving a shout out to a listener. You may know him, Tom C. From Arkansas. He has been a fan of the show, and he was an honoree of the commentary roast last year. And I just want to tell him he's doing great work. He's a frequent listener, and he expressed his love of the podcast, so giving him a shout out tonight.
Yes, Tom C., a very fine person, and a person I suspect we will be hearing much from in the coming days and weeks relating to American policy and world policy and Iran, which apparently is undergoing a leadership crisis as a result of a helicopter crash in Azerbaijan that appears to have, as I speak, ended the lives of President Raisi and I believe the foreign minister of Iran. And before we go any further, I have just one thing to say that does not have anything to do with geopolitics. Raisi is a terror master, a leader of a country that seeks the elimination from the face of the earth of my people, the Jewish people. He has sponsored, aided, and abetted the murder of hundreds of Americans. He is a force. He has been a force for evil and a person who is directly responsible for firing 300 missiles at the state of Israel just a couple of weeks ago, and responsible indirectly for the massacre and the injury of thousands of Jews just in the last year alone. We are told that when someone is murdered, as Rabbi Soloveitchik has written in the pages of commentary, we do not say, we actually call for the avenging of the blood. May God avenge their blood. And if it should be the case that Raisi was brought to his end by not by natural means, then God has avenged the blood that Raisi, the world has avenged the blood that Raisi has shed. No tears should be shed for his passing. The world is a better place without him. And I rejoice in his death. Now we can get to the geopolitics. We don't know what happened.
Well, you left out some of Raisi's victims, Iranians. He has been behind the suppression of protests of the women's movement, this hijab protests. They've been ruthless in poisoning their own people, the Iranian regime, and jailing dissidents and executing them. And so the toll that he has racked up over the decades as a Islamic revolutionary is pretty disgusting, and it extends to the Iranian people as well.
And remember, as an official of the Iranian government, both in and around and beside Iraq, hundreds of American servicemen were killed directly by Iran or by Iranian proxies in the course of our military involvement in Iraq. And we never held Iran to account. This was particularly in the last year of the second Bush administration, there were real questions about whether or not it should have been the case that America would strike back at Iran for direct attacks on American forces, and it was decided that it was more prudent not to do so. And again, we have one of those great hinge moments, what if moments in history about what kind of deterrence was prevented and what kind of license was given by the fact that America did not respond to Iran's efforts against our own troops. And we don't know how history would have been different had we said, you are come at us and we will come at you, and we will make you pay for what you do to us. So you better relent. That obviously was not the case and so the last 16 years have shown in Iran increasingly emboldened to act in ways that are injurious to American interests, while America is courting Iran and has been courting Iran through two of the last three administrations. Excuse me. So,
yeah, I mean, the upshot of Raisi's demise, and it seems pretty clear from what we're learning as we record this, that I don't think there were many survivors, if any, from this helicopter crash, is a potential succession fight in Iran. But it's important to note that despite holding the rank of president, he still had to defer to the Ayatollah, Ali Khamenei, who is in his 80s. He has had illnesses. He is trying to set up his son to succeed him as a supreme ruler. And Raisi was actually one of the main rivals in this Game of Thrones. So this actually ends up helping Khamenei and his family. And we shouldn't expect much of a policy change from the Iranian government, because they're all evil and they're all behind terrorism on a global scale. However, I would say this would be a great opportunity for the United States to support the internal opposition, to fund the protest movement, to maybe say a few words in support of the aspirations for a free society among many Iranians. We know that the Iranian regime is incredibly unpopular in Iran. It's much more popular in Foggy Bottom than it is in Iran itself. And if we had a capable foreign policy, I think we could make a real effort to open up the political space and pressure the regime from within.
Abe,
It's also,
let me
I think,
ask.
it's also an opportunity. I don't know that it will be seized upon for the State Department, the U.S., the West generally, to dispense with very stale, unproductive thinking on Iran. This is a good opportunity, depending on how things play out in this sort of Game of Thrones and Succession. Depending on how that plays out, I think it's an opportunity for us to think about Iran in new ways. Stop the desperate effort to court a regime that will prove, when the dust settles here and when there is a new president, that there is no room in this regime for moderates that can be coaxed into reasonable policy that isn't threatening the West, Israel in particular, and the U.S. So it could provide a kind of cognitive shakeup. Like I said, I don't know that will be seized on.
I think we know pretty well that it won't be seized on, right? I mean, I think Matt makes an interesting point about Raisi's efforts at suppressing the the anti-hijab women's movement in Iran that broke out in 2021. We right now have a situation in Afghanistan where exactly what we feared has come to pass, which is that women are being driven out of schooling, or being young girls are being made deliberately illiterate, or being married off at 9 years old. And that in America, good liberals speak a wonderful game about the equality between the sexes, or the necessity of making sure that women are given pride of place, even pride of place.
As we've been recently reminded during the debate over the Kansas City Chiefs kicker's commencement speech, right?
Yes, which is a moment of American Talibanism.
Really
that
outrage.
Said that
the outrage directed at Harrison Butker seems to end at the nation's shores and not be applied to the regimes in Iran and Afghanistan, where there are zero women's rights.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty astonishing, Christine, that we live in a world in which we are to look at our own situation in terms of the rights of women and find ourselves wanting, and yet hold absolutely no believe that our foreign policy and our diplomats are to hold no other country accountable for the way that they treat women, which seems to be
or
the
to
Biden administration.
even to hold our own administration and its foreign policy culpable here. Certainly in Afghanistan, I think we can, because everyone warned that this is exactly what would happen to the women of Afghanistan as soon as the pullout that Biden insisted upon, and the debacle of what occurred afterwards happened, and it did. That was no surprise. Nobody talks about it. You've got Kamala Harris going all over the country, going on and on about women's right to abortion. And all these threats to women's freedom, but really this is a broader failing of the Western feminist movement, in the sense that they became very international in scope about 20-30 years ago, and it was sort of all women have this common purpose, we share a common goal, so our sisters overseas, we must ally with them. There were actually very useful efforts to stop female genital mutilation and activities such as that, but that all kind of fizzled out when identity politics and multiculturalism really took root, particularly in academia, because then feminist theory couldn't really contend with that anymore, because they had to be respectful of other traditions, and then you really had a breakdown of any willingness to take a strong moral position about a woman's individual rights and freedoms and possibility. So that has just made them incapable of speaking not only overseas to the horrors that women in Iran and Afghanistan face, but to even to be able to describe what a woman is. One of the other stories that came across the transom this weekend, yet another student in a high school won a first place medal in a running competition that guaranteed future scholarships for college and whatnot. And it was a man. It was a young man running as a woman, a man who couldn't beat other men in competition, so ran as a woman and robbed a woman of scholarship. So that's something that our current feminist movement supports. So yeah, there's a huge amount of confusion here about what women need.
I'd like to tie this then into the other, major political news story of the moment, which is, of course, I suppose the end this week, or what is expected to be maybe the end this week, of the Trump trial in New York, which of course involves this question of the payment of hush money to a porn star by a presidential candidate. And if you want to talk about the moment in which the left, or liberals, American liberals, descended into complete confusion and impotency, in a weird way, in relation to questions of women's rights in the world, it was the moment in 1998 when the liberals decided to side with Bill Clinton. One of the reasons that people like us at the time said, this cannot stand. It was not that we thought that Clinton was a terrible liberal, or that he behaved so badly toward his intern, or stuff like whatever the individual reasons were, but that you were opening a space in American politics for a kind of decline in the expectation that we have of our politicians that made the rise of Donald Trump possible. There was no way for the American political system to contend with somebody like Donald Trump, who came along 18 years after the Monica Lewinsky scandal and was able to weather it and survive it and win the presidency because the party that might have been the moral beacon spokesman against this to say this cannot stand. A person who behaves this way toward women, talks this way about women, all of that cannot stand. Imagine a Democratic Party that had censured Clinton, or that had agreed to the impeachment of Clinton, or anything remotely like
or had
that.
not assassinated the character of the women upon whom he preyed. Let's just also
Exactly. That party found itself held to account for its moral failings and its decision to stick with the devil it knew rather than face, a possibility of a different future. Not only in the rise of Trump and the fact that they could not say to the American people, though they did, how this is really terrible and horrible and disgusting, when we knew that they had all supported a president who had done things like this in the Oval Office, and then acknowledged that he had done things like this and was disbarred for so acknowledging it.
And then went to Trump's wedding. And then when
yes.
and then when the debate with Hillary in 2016, of course, the Roger Stone stunt to have all of the Bill Clinton
Paula
accusers,
Broderick,
including
yes,
Juanita
Jones,
Broderick,
Juanita Broderick, right, sitting there at the
sitting
debate.
there during the
Right.
debate, and it really kind of just effectively, I think, tabled the morality issue for that campaign. As you were speaking, John, it occurred to me, the boomer ascendancy in presidential politics has really not gone well for the United States of America. Have you noticed that?
Yeah,
Have you ever noticed that these boomer presidents and America's state in the world and the state of our society it's not.
Abe has his sage Gen X look on his face right now. I just want our listeners to know.
Once again, we are Gen X partisans here, and
yes, we are.
That transition needs to happen.
Like Tom C. Can we just say?
Yes.
I mean, we have some people like our listener Tom C.
Like Tom C. from Arkansas. Yeah,
yes.
He could really change things up. I do want to go back to the Ricey crash for a second, because it does illustrate the role of contingency or accident in history. When you think about missed calls, you think about how one path can lead to another. We don't really know what, how involved he was in the IRGC operations. And as I said earlier, Khamenei really is the supreme leader. He controls the shots. But all it takes is one helicopter crash, and you have the opportunity to really kind of shake up the Iranian regime in a way that would further American interests. And you can go back in history too, and think about moments where, say, Churchill was hit by a car when visiting New York in the 1930s. He survived. He was remarkably resilient. Or Reagan, when he was shot early in his presidency, he survived.
Or Harry Truman, who was nearly assassinated by Puerto Rican separatists in the House, in the well of the Congress, I can't remember quite where, but there was an assassination attempt on Truman. Yeah, Reagan, Ford, all of these moments where history changes. But of course, I think we need to talk about the possibility to probability that there was nothing contingent here whatsoever, that in fact this was an Israeli action against the Iranian regime.
I mean, it was a very old helicopter in terrible weather also. So that's like,
right.
It could have been karma.
That would be a line.
That the bears and wolves of Azerbaijan are feasting on the carcasses of these guys right now. Right. We can only hope, but it could literally have just been an accident.
Matt,
well, I was going to say, Israel has never really targeted leaders of the enemy states before. So that would be a new policy
Israel
if they were to be behind it.
Yes.
Right. They've gone after the scientists.
They've gone after the scientists, and we don't really, right, yes.
And they've gone after the IRGC, but head of state, it would be a new innovation.
But let's talk about that.
I just have a quick question. Was the old helicopter, was it an old American helicopter before
It was a Bell something
sanctions?
or other. Yeah. It's like a 1979 helicopter. It is.
And they say sanctions don't target the regime. They see?
Finally,
okay, I want to talk
finally
about the
an
Israeli.
example.
Look,
Yeah.
I want to talk about the Israeli angle for a couple of reasons. First of which, it doesn't matter in a weird way. It doesn't matter whether Israel did it or not, as the world is going to
You can ask me to play.
assert that Israel did it.
Right.
Now, the Iranians, interestingly, are not saying that Israel did it, and Israel is not saying that Israel did it, and we're not saying that Israel did it. So it could have been weather, but let's assume that as the hours pass, people are going to say, well, obviously, cui bono, who would want to do it? Israel has a history of assassinating Iranians, and here's the logic of what I'm talking about. Israel hit this building in Damascus that was not the embassy to take out senior IRGC leaders. In response, Iran fires 300 missiles of differing quality, including long-range ballistic missiles, at Israel that are knocked down. Biden says to Israel, do not respond, take the win. Israel does not move. A lot of us thought that would be really bad if Israel did not respond. And we don't know what the nature is of Israel's thought process on whether or not it needed to reestablish some form of deterrence.
It
with
hit the
Iran.
one satellite, it fired the missile and took out the type of surveillance station there in Isfahan.
And it used a weapon that no one knew that Israel had.
Interesting technique, and was able to fly under the air defenses. Yeah,
and that message was, we have abilities and capabilities that you do not know.
But it was it was not a fulsome response of the sort.
And it was not it was not really a retaliation.
Many of us wanted, right?
Right. Okay, so it's basically a month after the Iranian attack, and how do you re-establish deterrence with Iran? Well, if you say to Iran, you know what? It's not just some IRGC guy. It's not just some what. You go anywhere, we know exactly where you are at all times. And if we get a free shot, you have now changed the rules of the game. You have fired directly on us. It's a miracle that we were able to avoid large-scale damage. We did so using many techniques that we have developed and some international support and all of that. But do not think that we are taking our eye off the ball, or that we are so consumed with what's going on in Gaza that we are not able to walk and chew gum at the same time. You're going to go off in a helicopter, go off with your president and your foreign minister, for God knows what reason, into Azerbaijan in an old helicopter, and we know you're there and we know you're going. We're going to take you out. And now you know. Now, they've done that anyway, unless the helicopter's found and it can be shown that it was not taken down by any means or something, and that it really was an accident. Right now, they can't even find it as we are speaking. They don't know where it is, and they don't know.
Well, the Turkish drone has found it. That was
really
breaking just before we went on to record the podcast.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. So again, even if, by the way, it wasn't hit by it wasn't taken down the way Putin took down the head of the Wagner Group.
Right.
You could interfere with the telemetry. You could, take over this. Israel is going to get credit or blame for this no matter what.
Yeah. Can I just make one more observation about accident? So as this happened, of course, a member of the American National Security Staff, Brett McGurk, was holding back-channel conversations with the Iranians in Oman. And so if you look at it from Israel's point of view, Israel has done, it seems to me, above and beyond trying to placate the Americans. And of course, it's never enough, right? But Israel did not respond in a huge manner to the unprecedented attack that Iran launched against them. The constant funneling of aid, and now the pier has arrived. the attempts, to placate the American demands to minimize civilian casualties. It just seems to me that being behind this downed helicopter would not make the Americans happy, and that might be reason for Israel to not actually have had a hand in it. Speculating blindly, of course.
Well, we actually, this brings us to a slightly, different, or it's not a different topic at all, but another angle on this topic, which of course is that the Israeli War Cabinet, which means the three people who are making the decisions on the war in Gaza, that has come together, that is Yoav Gallant and Bibi Netanyahu from the Likud party, from the same party, and Benny Gantz, who has joined the government, though he is leader of another smaller party, did not bring his party in with him. He is part of the war cabinet, and the three of them, and now they have fallen into open public warfare with Yoav Gallant attacking Bibi publicly and saying, he's done a bad job from within his coalition, and Benny Gantz saying, if he does not spell out and elucidate a plan for the post-war administration of Gaza, or a plan for Gaza by June 8th, I will pull out of the government. Now, two things need to be said about Gantz's speech, which are not being said in the American media. Number one, that doesn't mean anything. Gantz is not a voting member of the government exactly. He is part of the war cabinet. His party is not in. If he leaves, they lose one vote. Theoretically, Bibi had a 4-seat majority when they came in. His majority has not lessened in size, I think, or maybe by one person. So he would remain prime minister if Gantz pulls out of the war cabinet. It will be a political crisis. It's already a political crisis. It will not sink his government. And in any case, even if his government were sunk, even if the government falls, which right now there is no actual plan for it falling exactly, he will still remain prime minister until there are elections, which will take a couple of months. So he will be prime minister through the summer, while Israel has to make these key decisions on how it's going to conduct the war in Rafah, and then what it's going to do about the north, and obviously what it might be doing about Iran. And what's interesting about this strike then is the question of, if Israel did it, who agreed to it? Was it part of the overall war planning for the Gaza war that the war cabinet is involved in, or was it entirely on a different track and something that the Israeli intelligence is watching? Israeli intelligence gave the heads up that this was something that could be done. Did Bibi make this decision on his own? Did he consult the war cabinet? And Gantz's position, by the way, just to wrap this up in a bow, is bizarre and incoherent, and clearly means that he is simply working as a kind of robot for Jake Sullivan and the Biden administration and Chuck Schumer and whoever, because he has announced that he wants Bibi to make a plan. And the plan needs to be a good plan, how they're going to run Gaza after the war. And it shouldn't be, Israel's not going to shouldn't reoccupy Gaza. So there needs to be a new plan. But guess what Benny Gantz didn't do in his big announcement, or Yoav Gallant for that matter, is say, here's my plan. I have a really good plan. Or when talking about it, vaguely talks about some sort of international administration of Gaza, which is preposterous, because the nations that would administer Gaza don't want to administer Gaza. They're making it very clear they want no part of this, thus making it another in a very long line of American proposals for how to deal with the Palestinian problem that involves saying, you know what, as George Shultz did in 1982 with the Shultz Plan, you know what, Jordan should take over the administration of the West Bank. That's really Jordan. Wouldn't that be great? Here's my plan, Jordan. And then about a minute after he was finished, the king of Jordan said, what are you, crazy? I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. And that was the end of the Schultz plan. And then we have this, but then we have the peace plan, the Oslo plan, the this, the that. Nothing works out. And now we just have Israeli politicians hoping somehow that Americans will slingshot them either into power or help them slingshot Bibi Netanyahu out of power. And it's all a bizarre distraction. and I do blame Bibi for this distraction, and we should talk about that, which is they're still not doing full-scale action in Rafah. And the entire country of Israel is starting to come apart at the seams because of this. You remember if you watch the documentary The Civil War, if you remember the way that Ken Burns described what was going on between Lincoln and McClellan, and how Lincoln is sitting there, McClellan is the general of the Union Army, and he is drilling them, and he's doing this, and he's doing that, and he's not doing anything. And Lincoln is going crazy because McClellan will not use what is to hand to start really engaging with the South. And something like that. And then Lincoln finally had to sort of like pull the trigger, get rid of McClellan, put Grant in, and all of that. Like, there is something of this going on that Israel is poised. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It is the very fact that they haven't launched a full-scale operation in Rafah that I find very hard to square with the idea that they went ahead and did something so audacious as to take out Raisi. That's to me, it doesn't. You would much sooner think that they'd say, because even, by the way, Gantz is saying we have to topple the Hamas leadership in Gaza. So you would sooner think that they would just go ahead, finish that before taking out a sort of nominal head of state of Iran.
I think the real danger with some of these plans is the Lebanonization of Gaza. I mean, say the plan works. Say somehow Biden is able to pull off this diplomatic masterstroke, and Israel agrees there's going to be some type of internationally administrated government in the Gaza Strip, and the Saudis buy into the idea, and so you have this multinational force or doing something in order to lay the groundwork for peace or semi-rule of law in the Strip. Well, Hamas will just become what Hezbollah is in Lebanon. Hamas will become, especially if there are limitations on Israel's operational control, ability to intervene security-wise, Hamas will become kind of the shadow government that's still able to organize and still able to pull off attacks. I mean, the situation in Israel is so disheartening these days because, it's not just Rafah. There's now fighting in the north of Gaza too. And then Hezbollah launched one of its largest barrages of the war to date over the past couple of days. So you have the entire northern sector that's still there. There seems to be a kind of paralysis here that I think stems from the desire to keep on America's good side. That is, I think, producing the type of social fissures you mentioned, John. And as we say on this podcast all the time, that doesn't seem like it's sustainable.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that's what I talk about when I say that I think the country of Israel is cracking up emotionally. It is being asked to deal with two very difficult emotional problems at the same time. Number one is this working? Like, is this commitment that we have made that is now 8 months long to destroy Hamas, is it working? Because somehow we got stalled out. We stalled out, and there are many explanations for it. And some of them are American, and some of them are not American, and some of them are other things that are going on. But we stalled out. We're terrified for the hostages. We keep getting dribbling word out day after day of this hostage being dead, that hostage being dead, the discovery of dead hostages by Israeli forces in Gaza, having to deliver the news that the hostages are dead and all of that. And then every now and then a proof of life video from a hostage. And then it turns out the hostage who made the proof of life video is dead also. And this is a psychologically grueling thing. And the fact is that Israelis don't really understand why the pause has happened, why the Rafah push has not started. And as a result, the politics in Israel have started up again with a vengeance as this conversation that seems nominally to be about the how is Gaza going to be administered after we win, when they haven't even won yet and haven't started the final process to win. And part of that is because there's no conversation to be had, because it's not like, okay, we are now engaged on this terrible final thing that we have to do that is going to be very difficult and potentially very costly, but that we have to do as a matter of our national existential future. And so we are going to default to the worst kind of political impulses, and we can blame us. We can blame the United States for its inconstancy and Biden's behavior. And then again, once again, Jake Sullivan is going back to Israel for conversations. Why? Because they're using Israeli officials as human shields to prevent the Rafah offensive from going forward. Every time they announce an American is going to go to Israel for talks, that sort of seems to freeze the Israelis in place yet again. And if they don't get going, the country is going to have is having, whatever this means, a collective nervous breakdown, which, by the way, then speaks to the possibility that, yes, they did do the Iranian action because they had the mode, they had the opportunity, they had a reason. America's going to be mad, but America's mad at them already. You don't get a shot like this too often, right? They got a helicopter, they knew where it was going, and they decide, it's you can't say, okay, we'll wait until next week to see how America feels, and then we'll take out Raisi. They may never have had another chance to take out Raisi. And it was always their policy to do it if they were going to be able to do it. I don't know. But Israel's behavior over the last 3 weeks is the behavior of a country, a populace in desperation, and a government increasingly in a condition of desperation. And so therefore, its behavior is unpredictable by definition. Like if I told you in 2 hours that 200,000 Israelis went into Rafah, that would sort of come as a surprise, right? You'd be say, because like 3 weeks ago, we're like, okay, they're going. It looks like they're going in now, and then they didn't, or they're going into the tunnel. They exposed 50 tunnels that are going into Egypt. It's a whole other conversation we could have, but I don't think we'll have today.
Well, I think the strategy of slow raids, slowly expanding, light footprint is how we used to refer to it during the Iraq War 15 years ago, is wrong. It's not working. And the Hamas is popping up again in the north. And as this MK, Amit Halevi, had a Facebook post that went viral responding to Gantz's words last week and kind of the run-up to his statement on Saturday. This was translated in Daniel Gordis' newsletter, Israel from the Inside. It's Amit Halevi saying that starting in mid-January, the IDF abandoned without any plausible explanation its plan, which had included occupation and control as preliminary steps in all the cities of the Gaza Strip. Instead, the IDF went straight to raids and firing, even in places where, according to the original plan, it was supposed to have conquered and controlled. And if you don't control the territory, then Hamas is just going to reconstitute. And so it's playing, it seems to me, like whack-a-mole here. And that's not serving any larger strategic purpose. And I am blaming America. I'm blame America first, neocon. First. I am. Yes. I'm blaming America.
There you go. The first one.
Because from the very beginning, Biden is trying to stop this war. He is trying to stop the war. He's doing everything he can to sustain the status quo, which is only leading to more deaths and more incoherence. And I feel as if Israel again, the government there, America is its biggest supporter, and if you lose America, Israel really will be isolated. And so they're pursuing this current strategy in order to appease Biden, and it's not working. And this is a very bad situation in my view.
again today, Biden throwing some more confusion in the mix, but in his commencement speech at Morehouse College said, "Oh, a lot of people in my family aren't happy with our support for Israel, and I want an immediate ceasefire, and the humanitarian crisis, and this, that, and the other." So he sounds like a milder version of a campus protester.
Yeah.
That's not helpful.
When the campus protester at one of the colleges this weekend's demanded an immediate and permanent ceasefire.
Permanent, yes.
Right.
Biden
Permanent
applauded.
ceasefire. Yes.
Yep.
That would mean Hamas won the war.
Yes.
Someone just needs to shake Biden up. Shake him up.
His whole
Wake
speech,
up.
his speech was he had that, however he prepares for these things these days. He did the angry, shouty, frowny face thing. That he had a bit of that at the State of the Union, but however that gets him revved up, he had a lot of that today. So it was very strange to hear him talking about peace and ceasefire while sort of yelling at everybody in the audience. But this was also a domestic. This was really a domestic speech because it was trying to shore up his African American voter base. And there wasn't a lot of enthusiasm during this talk. He sounded like the 2 points that I noticed were, first, he repeated the lie that's been debunked, that you're not allowed to give anyone water at a Georgia polling station, which suggests maybe he watches Curb Your Enthusiasm, because there was a very funny episode in the last
the whole
season.
plot line.
Yes,
the whole
it
plot
was
line
hilarious.
Of the season is about Larry getting
It's
arrested
about Larry
for giving somebody a bottle of water.
Right. So there was that.
Yeah.
But then there was all this. There was the kind of hyperbole that I think doesn't land in the same way as it used to, unless you're among friendlies, as I assume he thought he was. But he was saying, what's democracy? Black men are being killed in the street. What does it mean to be a black man who loves his country, even if it doesn't love him back in equal measure? I mean, it all didn't really go anywhere. Morehouse College, for those who don't know, is an African American male college, historically Black college. And there were students who turned their backs on him. The older faculty members seemed quite supportive of Biden, but a lot of the students were not super happy to have him there because of the Israel stuff.
Well, there's a big age divide in the Black community that's showing up in poll after poll, which the 65 and older African American voters are much more supportive of Biden than younger Black voters. And I don't, as we are always saying, I don't think it's the Middle East that's driving the disillusionment among younger African Americans.
No,
I think it's everything else that everybody else hates about Biden. It's really bringing America together in a lot of ways.
Yes, there's now a never Biden vote, basically.
Never Biden movement.
What struck me about what he was saying too was that these are very sort of dated liberal talking points on race. It sort of doesn't take account of anything and any of the sort of change in attitudes among all sorts of Americans over the past, certainly since COVID, but since Trump. He was speaking in sort of the caretaker terms, which I think now fall very flat and are dated and creepy, I think, to most, even to liberals. It's not, he doesn't know the room at all. It's not that he didn't read the room. He's completely unfamiliar with there being a sort of different demographic at work here.
As is his vice president, it should be noted. Whenever she tries to play that role, she often finds herself, twisted up in verbal knots, attempting to seem hip to things that she clearly disapproves of or never heard.
I find even the idea of trying to make a move politically through a commencement address to suggest that Biden is like about to go on as the lead act on a vaudeville bill with Will Rogers and W.C. Fields. Like, when does a commencement address matter? That's not how things happen in the United States in 2024. It used to matter what commencement address the president delivered. He would usually deliver one and only one during an academic season, and it was a major statement of purpose or principle if it went right. And we are so far beyond that. And I understand that he wanted to do it to send a message to the Black community, but doing it at an HBCU itself is sort of an odd, dated way to do that. It's almost like he really would be better served to, I don't know, make TikToks or do something that spoke more directly to the mass of Black voters. Not and I don't know what that is, and I'm not a campaign. I don't understand the new techniques of American politics using social media. This is something that it's very hard for me to sort of sort through what seems to be nonsense and what actually does seem to be catching. But it's pretty startling that this is where he and his people go to. It speaks again to some bizarre out of stepness that is another reason to think that his campaign is in critical condition. Because one of the things that go ahead.
I was just going to say, because and you actually sent this around earlier to us. A lot of his allies in the media are again pointing this out again gently. So you have Ezra Klein wrote a long opinion piece in the New York Times about this. Jen Psaki and who else was it? They had a sort of debate where they are all talking about how concerned they are, and Biden really isn't bringing it anymore, and what are we going to do? And again, it's all done with that very gentle tone. Ezra Klein did raise the age issue again, but it reminds me of, what was it, 4 or 5 months ago when there was that flurry of anxiety about Biden's age, which then everyone was calmed after his amazing State of the Union. I'm saying with heavy sarcasm in my voice, but they're in that cycle again. So I kind of feel like that they're in this dysfunctional relationship with their candidate, where they keep having these angst-ridden, behaviors about whether or not he's capable of doing the bare minimum of running for president again.
I just think when presidents look like they're out of touch, when this becomes a kind of common theme almost day to day to day, that is like the stink of death. As I think about presidents who have served one term and one term only, including Trump, like he is talking about things, or he is concentrating on things, or he is culturally surrounding himself with it that have nothing to do with what is going on with my life right now.
What does he have to brag about?
I'm not saying he needs to brag.
I'm just saying it's amazing. The border isn't fixed.
Inflation,
the prices are still high. Israel,
it's okay because prices are only high on the most used things, like electricity and gas and housing. Otherwise, inflation's great because eggs are now a little cheaper than they were.
Ukraine is losing the war, and Zelensky gave a speech over the weekend saying that the West doesn't want Ukraine to win. We are being forced out of the country of Niger, where we had forward operating bases that gave us counterterrorism capabilities in Africa, because apparently one of Biden's diplomats shouted, she behaved rudely to some of the Nigerians, and so oops, we lost Afghanistan. It's incredible. It's so that out of touchness, maybe he could connect if he actually had something to show for the almost 4 years he's been president. But what does he have? Right. He has a lot of money on chips. Okay.
Well, and he boasted about basically undermining the balance of power in federal government by he boasted at this college speech this weekend saying the Supreme Court said I couldn't forgive all those loans, but boy did I show them.
But then also conversely, there was that poll number from I think the New York Times Siena poll last week, which showed that like 15 to 20% of people think that Biden was responsible for the end of Roe v. Wade. So he doesn't. Everything even if you're like a pro-choice person, under his presidency, you had the reversal of Roe v. Wade. So what has he done?
Again, I think these are all very solid reasons why his candidacy is in trouble from a policy issue level, and that Trump is lucky that Biden's record is so problematic, because Trump is bad at making the case against somebody on policy terms. So the more obvious it is, and the less he has to press the case, the better it is for him to go to his strengths, which are, of course, I don't know, character assassination and weird nihilistic quippy jokiness and saying everything would have been better if I had remained president. I'm just more struck by how um, rather than what it is that Biden could do to like make the case for his presidency by citing everything that he's done as president, that the means that he is using to put, sort of press his suit with the American people for a renewal of their vows is so ineffectual and so without any, if I'm going to continue this, analogy, like without any seductive quality whatsoever that says, remember how you liked me, or look how I can talk to you in a way that this other guy can't talk to you. Maybe he really is completely incapable of doing that, but his campaign has more money than God. They can do almost anything they want to at will. And you'll notice that they're not doing very much. I mean, they may be doing stuff behind the scene, or they're setting up, they have 55 field offices in Wisconsin, which is very expensive. And I gather that's really amazing. 55 field offices in Wisconsin. But, you can't put lipstick on a pig, and you can't sell a product that people find
his
tasteless
message is,
or
but I'm sorry to interrupt, but his message is really dark. And he's the guy who's been in charge, and he's basically like, this country is terrible. And everyone's like, all right, well, so first of all, you've been in DC for most of your life, and you've been president. Like, why is it still so terrible? There's no way for him to even, he's not an optimistic politician, never has been. But when he ran as the adult in the room, the calm force, the benevolent grandpa who everybody was going to be relieved to have after Trump, there was at least a sensibility, but that's gone because the age has actually become a crutch, a real problem for him, in fact. But there is no positive message. I can't think of this Morehouse College speech. People should really listen to the whole thing. Go watch. I think it's up on YouTube. It's not. It's depressing. It's just, this is a commencement. These people are going out into the world to begin their young lives, and he's like, this world is just going to hell. I mean, it's disturbing to me that was the message.
Okay, so let me take pride of place and offer today's commentary recommends, since we hadn't discussed who would do it. I was on a plane yesterday, and I watched a very unusual and interesting movie that you probably haven't heard of. It's called What Happens Later, and it is co-written and directed by its star, Meg Ryan. And it is the story of two former lovers who run into each other as both their planes are forced to make a landing at a regional airport in the middle of a storm. And they see each other as for the first time in 25 years. And they're together in this terminal for, a day and a night as they wait for their planes to take off. And they're the only people in the movie. You see almost nobody else except, halves of bodies of people rolling their suitcases. And it's slightly magically realist. Things are going on. It appears that, they're being sort of kept there by somewhat supernatural forces. And they just go through, it's based on a play, so it's very play-like, but they go through what's happened in their lives since they were together, why they broke up, what's happened, the disappointments. They're both around 60, and they're both around 60, Meg Ryan and her co-star David Duchovny. And the two of them together are extraordinary. They have a kind of easy, the suggestion that they have fallen back into an intimacy that they possessed decades earlier, that they never found with anybody else. They achieve almost instantly. And Duchovny in particular is a revelation in this part. He is so winning and so charming and so funny, and the dialogue is very sparkling. The movie is too long. It's about 20 minutes too long because it is so slight. But it ends very beautifully in a way I don't want to sort of reveal, because it is very unconventional. and the it's just a very striking little piece of work that shows. We haven't literally seen Meg Ryan in anything for almost a decade. She made a movie called Ithaca, which she also wrote and directed and played a small part in, and then kind of vanished. Um, Famously, kind of a victim of bad plastic surgery. Her face now, as she is 60, has kind of settled into, she looks like a woman of her own age rather than in some weird timelessness. And Duchovny also 60. So you've never quite seen it's kind of a romantic comedy. It kind of isn't really. And it really is well worth checking out. I'm sure it's available on various streaming services.
I also saw a movie this weekend, which I would like to disrecommend and to warn people against, if that's okay.
Please.
Since you gave a recommendation, I'd like to give a disrecommendation.
Yes.
I took my family to see the movie If, thinking that it would be a family film. And If, for those of you who do not know, is the new film by John Krasinski, of The Office and Jack Ryan and of the Quiet Place movies. And it is a movie about a young girl who can she's 12 years old. She can see imaginary friends. They are real, and she has to reunite imaginary friends with their now grown childhood pals. And it's a remarkable example of how a movie can have a talented director, really nice cinematography, I mean, beautifully shot, great special effects, amazing talent. Steve Carell voices one of the imaginary friends, and Steve Carell's always great. It has Fiona Shaw plays the eccentric grandmother. And yet the movie is still just terrible. It's just terrible. It all adds up to, it's one big cloying melancholy. It's, as my daughter said, it's depressing. As my son said, as soon as the credits began rolling, he stood up and looked at me and my wife and said, "That movie was awful." It was just, I don't know. It's not for families. I don't know who it's for. I don't know who it's for, but not for me.
Can I say that when children say that a movie is bad, I don't know if people who don't have children know how uncommon
that's
you
pretty
could.
You got to watch out, John. My son is 10, but he's coming for your job because, as he put, he gave his reasons. He said it had no action and no humor. And those are the two things he's looking for.
Those are movie killers.
Yeah,
exactly.
But seriously, you could take a kid to see a 2-hour loop of a Mexican jumping bean, and you would come out of it and they would say that was great. Like, they'll like anything. So when they don't like something, man, you know that something has
sparing you all from
has dirtied the bed. Thank you for the salvation.
Thank you provided. Thank you for your recommendation
for America to not see If, which is also, by the way, sometimes it's much more important to disrecommend than to recommend, because you spare people pain.
I feel like
Matt will never get those hours of his life back.
Yeah, we've been too nice. We've been recommending all these things. It's been a while since we had a disrecommendation. So
okay, well, maybe we'll revisit this entire thing and have and we were usually we were doing recommends
for the record
in order to deal with the crushing morosity problem. And to do something positive at the end of the show.
Kind of doubles down on morosity.
But I just want to state for the record that having read Kyle Smith's review of If, I voted to take my family to see Kung Fu Panda 4. Kung Fu Panda movies, you know what you're getting. They have both action and humor, satisfying my son's criteria. But no, I was vetoed. And this is
now
what
they'll
I
know
have
better.
to show for it.
And now they'll know better.
When will someone listen to Matt? That's all I'm asking here.
If only Jake Sullivan would listen to
If
you.
only Jake
That's
Sullivan.
really the important thing. But you need, if you're going to get to the point where you
Yes.
can make Jake Sullivan listen, you need to make your son and daughter listen first. And I think,
That's
but I
the
think
first
you have
step.
gone a long way
Yeah, I
by
proved.
taking them to
Listen to Dad.
to listen to Dad. Okay, we should all listen to our dads. And with that, I will bring this to a close. For Abe, Matt, and Christina, John Podhoretz, keep the candle burning.